What's going on, everybody, and welcome inside the Browns beat. The Cleveland Browns have a head coach. He has done a press conference. They are rounding out that coaching staff, and it is almost time for us to be able to look away from the coaches for a minute and start looking at how the Browns are going to improve their situation. And it is a situation as we head into next year and beyond. We'll get into all that tonight. Plus, get yourself active, get yourself ready, because we'll also take your questions and comments in the chat. So if you are joining us live here tonight, whether you're on YouTube or Twitch or Twitter or wherever you're watching, and you've got questions and you want to be a part of the show and you want Fred, mostly Fred, sometimes me, to answer them, please get active in the comments and we'll be bringing things up. You guys will help run the show here for us tonight. With you as always, I'm your host, Michael Keefe, and with me, my co-host, the always impressive, the legendary Fred Greetham. Hey, Fred, what's going on?
Good evening, Mike. We got a week after ruminating. Last week we had the hiring, and we were on the show right after. So we've had a lot take place. Things starting to come into focus. Spent the day in Berea yesterday getting to know Todd Monken a little bit. And I'll tell you one thing, right? First reaction is just the opposite of Kevin Stefanski, as far as demeanor, persona, a different individual, kind of the old school raspy voice, from yelling at everybody and colorful language. I mean, he was kind of colorful in the formal press conference. He came into the media room after, kind of informal, off the record, and was like dropping bombs everywhere, like it was like, whoa. So I think it's going to be quite interesting. He tells you where he's at and where he thinks, and we'll get into some of that as we go along here tonight. But yeah, everybody that's watched this and read what I write knows that I felt Jim Schwartz was my choice in what I knew, but not knowing about Monken. He's starting to grow on me, and I see why they hired him. And I think that there's a good chance to turn things around. He reminds me of somebody, and if he goes down that route, I think everybody will be pretty happy. So we have a few things we can talk here tonight.
Yeah, we've got plenty of things. Again, I'm sure you guys have questions. Again, I've got one video question that we'll get to a little bit later. Again, that's going to be the format of the show. We still are going to take your comments and all that, but especially all of you guys that join us on a regular basis. Every once in a while, we can see your face. So stay tuned. Just to give you a little heads up, I'm going to do a shameless plug first before we really get into the meat and potatoes of the show tonight. And then we'll give you a little heads up on what's going to happen the next couple of weeks. Shameless plug first. Know you're joining us here on Inside the Browns Beat here at 7 o'clock. Between now and 9 o'clock, just get yourself ready. But I hope to see you all back at 9 o'clock. We've got a milestone episode of Garage Beers, episode 300, with special guest Travis Hafner and Mike Fratello, who, talk about great timing, he is a part-time analyst for the Cavs and the Clippers. And we saw that trade go down last night. So he provides great insight on that. And then for all of you old school Browns fans, and I know some of you are there, a guy that caught a lot of passes from one Bernie Kosar at old Cleveland Municipal Stadium, including some pretty memorable ones. Brian Brennan joins us to just take a walk down memory lane. So episode 300 of Garage Beers, you'll want to be there for that at 9 o'clock. Also, just to kind of lead off the show with this, we're going to have, unless something big and crazy happens, and then we'll figure that out as it goes. But we're going to have a 2-week hiatus after this show for Inside the Browns Beat. But then we'll be back after that 2-week stretch. So we won't be no Inside the Browns Beat next Wednesday or the Wednesday after, but we will be back at the end of February with Inside the Browns Beat going all the way as we approach the league new year and the draft and all that stuff. So just heads up for your planning purposes. If you're normally joining us at 7 o'clock on Wednesday nights, next week, the week after, find something else to do and then come hang out with us on Garage Beers. All right. Other bits of just info to get to before we get into the show. I didn't say this, but please go subscribe to the OBR, obr.com. oldest, largest Browns independent site in all of Cleveland. So make sure you are subscribed over there. All right. So, Fred, let's start with it. The last time we talked, they had just kind of dropped the bomb that they were hiring Todd Monken, and we dove into that a bit. We took some viewer questions, all that kind of stuff. But like you said, Fred, now that we've seen the press conference, now that we've heard him speak, lots of Browns coaches, Fred, you've done this more times than you care to talk about. You've been to more of those introductory press conferences than you care to talk about. There's not how many coaches lost the introductory press conference, Fred? It's not many.
Not many. Usually that's the big thing. They won the press conference and so forth. That you mentioned, this is the 19th full-time head coach hired in the Browns history. Okay.
Which seems an awfully low number.
You know how many I've covered? 13.
Oh, gosh.
So that and 11. This was number 11 since 99. I was around when Sam Ratigliano. I was an intern, and then I spent a couple years. But then I moved to coach in Arizona, and that's when the switch to Marty Schottenheimer occurred. I came back in 89 when Bud Carson was introduced as the head coach. So Bud Carson was my first intro. I got to see Jim Schaffner, who took over, but he was interim, so it didn't count. But then Bill Belichick. So I had Bud Carson, Bill Belichick, and then the 11 since the return, Chris Palmer being the first one, and so forth. So think about that. There's only 6 before, going back to Paul Brown, Blanton Collier. Those guys were around quite a while. So with that being said, most of them, in the new era, that's all, the 11, it's always, why are you the guy to turn things around? And it's, they say their things, and really there's been the closest to doing that was Kevin Stefanski. Since the team returned, because they went to the playoffs, I think in his first year.
Yep.
And that was COVID year, very tough year, but they became respectable immediately, under Stefanski. The other ones, coming right out of the franchise, expansion, you knew that was, but with that being said, Todd Monken, you could just see the emotion in him, an old grizzled NFL coach, college coach, 37 years coaching. To get this opportunity, he was overcome with emotion, and rightly so. But you don't see that too much from guys in the NFL,
right,
let alone a guy, and you listen to him talk and see his family there and so you had emotion. You had some straightforward bluntness,
right.
These guys are going to be accountable, and then I didn't come here because of Jim Schwartz, and the players make this, and, very straightforward. And I just think it was refreshing to hear, because I think he has a little bit of a track record, and the accountability to take the big check from the Haslams, that they expect a kick butt team, offense all the way around.
Yep.
And I take him pretty serious. He knows this is maybe his one and only chance. And, he just obviously there's a lot involved, but I think Browns fans can take heart that I believe he's going to have a big hand in helping redesign not just the offensive scheme, but the direction of the players that they bring in. Andrew Berry will draft them, but I think he's going to have a big input, in that. And just like Jim Schwartz did, Schwartz, can whine about a lot, and I understand why not getting the job. But last year, we all know how bad the Browns offense was. Schwartz pounded the table and got Mason Graham and Carson Schlesinger with the first 2 picks. There's no question in my mind that's why that happened, because Schwartz went to Barons that pled his case. And this whole defense was pretty much fit to him into what he wanted. So he had everything he wanted on the defense. And so I think Monken's going to do that in the offensive side. Monken's very similar. If you want to look at the antithesis, he's the offensive guy like Schwartz that has never got the chance till now. So I just think it's interesting, how it's played out. But I think, 27 points a game, that's double what the Browns have done. That's what he's averaged over there in the last 3 years. Now,
are you allowed to score that many points in a game? Is that against the rules?
I think it might be in Cleveland.
Yeah.
We haven't, it's like air raid. Sure. I mean, he's not bringing Lamar Jackson or he's not bringing Derrick Henry, but I think he knows what it takes. I mean, he's just been, you talk about air raid, he was coaching air raid passing offense and a run-dominated offense. And then when Lamar Jackson, more of a running quarterback, and then he brings in Derrick Henry, the last 3 years, besides scoring 27 a game, which is third best in the NFL, they're number 1 overall in rushing. And, and they're in the top 3 in scrimmage yards and all these things. So I think he's going to have a big say in not only the quarterback room, but the whole offense. And if you could get that up to speed, kind of on par with the player and the personnel that you have on defense, I think you have some things that can go well.
Hey, you get an offense that's on par with that defense, you're going to win a Super Bowl. I think that's the way that would work.
That's the question.
Yeah. So I want to dive into a couple things because then I want to turn our attention. A lot of people's attention turn now to what's going on with the assistant coaches, and there's a list of them that we know he's bringing in. Obviously, there's still one big question out there that everybody keeps asking about. We'll get into that, especially those comments you brought up. But there's a topic that keeps coming up for me, Fred, and I want your take on it. And you guys in the comments, you dive in too. But I keep seeing that people saying this one phrase, and they're saying it with their whole chest, and they're saying it as if it is just a fact. And I don't really know where it's coming from. And I made a video on it just the other day, but give me your thoughts, Fred. Here's what I keep hearing from people. They've now seen Monken. They've heard the press conference. He obviously won people over in that press conference. It was for all the people that didn't like the "we got to be betters" from Kevin Stefanski. They fell in love with Todd Monken in that press conference. But I keep seeing this thing that gets said, like people just know for sure. They say, well, I like Monken. The process was a disaster. And the execution of the search was just a total failure. But they landed on Monken, and I think that's going to be okay. And I don't know what they're talking about. Is your impression of the way the Browns went through their coaching search that it was some kind of unmitigated disaster, and they may have just been lucky to fall upon Todd Monken at the end?
No, I mean, I listened after the press conference that was open to the, it was formal, they had, that was what everybody saw. There was clips, and sure, and I even put them out. I mean, we had a group, off to the side with Jimmy Haslam and Andrew Berry. And then, by the way, Todd Monken came into the media room after it was all said and done and just sat on a table and shot the breeze with us. And he was very colorful. I mean, Kevin would do that and he would tell stories, but whoa, this guy's pretty blunt, and so looking forward to that. It was a good start. But as far as I thought, especially the explanation Andrew Berry, I felt they really had a concerted effort what they were looking to do. He said they had 23 names on their list. They narrowed it down to, I think, 8 outside the organization that they wanted to seek permission. And Monken was at the top of the list from the get-go. They had done research. Now, He didn't say when. I have to think this is what was it a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Whenever they decided we're moving on from Kevin Stefanski, there's some time in there that they put together their net and narrowed it down to 8. They were going to ask for permission, and Monken was one of them. And if you remember, they announced their interviews. They announced internally Jim Schwartz, Tommy Reese immediately. The first outside was Todd Monken.
Yes.
Okay. So I believe them when they had him at the top of their list. Haslam said he was either at the top or near the top from the get-go, and he never left that spot. So that tells me they really were thinking way before that they're looking for an offensive guy like Todd Monken, even though they had Jim Schwartz there and they were putting out all those positives. In their mind, I think they were planning on Jim Schwartz if they could keep him as the defensive coordinator. That's pretty obvious to me. So with that said, I don't think that they backed in. These other people got the sense that maybe whether Mike McDaniel, I don't really know, he wasn't going to get the job, or he didn't really want to reboot his career here or whatever. I think it was pretty clear from what they said that they were going to talk to all these, but they really thought from the get-go, Monken, if they could get him, would be a good chance. They knew he was going to go with Harbaugh wherever he went, unless he got a head coaching job. So I don't really buy that they didn't know what they were doing. They weren't just chasing the biggest name out there. Oh, we got to get this guy and that guy. I think specifically some of the things, I don't know all of it, but when you heard about the Shedeur Sanders, that he said things that made them feel comfortable, whether it is, I can work with Shedeur Sanders. I like him. I think he has some ceiling. And we all know if he were to hit on Sanders or Sanders hits it, that would be a huge win for the Browns.
Oh my gosh.
Because the 5th round pick is like a free window for 3 or 4 years financially, after the Watson thing. We don't know what he said about Watson. We don't know if he's going to say, no, we got to get another quarterback. But I think this is one guy that is really going to put his stamp on it. Whereas Kevin, you got the idea. He's like, hey, I'll work with whoever, because we had asked him about pounding the table. I want that, he was always, maybe he did, but I don't get the sense he did. This guy, I think, will, because he kept stressing this is a players' league and it's about players, and he knows what type of players you need to win in the NFL. So, as far as the search, I believe when Haslam and Barry both said we felt really strong about him all the way along in this process.
Yeah, I actually think Phil in the comments, who is not a bot, I think maybe put it exactly what I've been trying to say, put it in the exact right way. So I want to put this comment up. He says, Andrew Berry seems to have a secrecy obsession, which leads to an information void, and that void gets filled with a ton of garbage. And that is how I feel like this went. Once nobody really knew what direction they were going to go, everybody just assumed things. And then he says, it seems like they ran a pretty focused process that resulted in the right guy for them. I keep seeing these things saying, well, you could have just hired Todd Monken from day one. He could have just been your guy and you could have gotten him. And I don't know why that serves any purpose to even think that way, because they ran a thorough search. They wanted to talk to these. I think the other thing is knowing Andrew Berry and how he operates, Fred. I think even if he identified that he wanted Todd Monken from the jump, I think he still would have wanted to talk to Udinsky and Shieldhouse and McDaniel. And I think he wanted to do his due diligence and wind up with the right guy. But the problem, and I think the reason you see so many people saying what I said before, Fred, where it was a disaster and it was a faulty process and all that, is by taking his time. And like you said, maybe some of these guys got word that the Browns kind of had a direction they were thinking about going. That's when you get the reports that Mike McDaniel pulls out and Grant Udinski pulls out. The most egregious one was Jesse Minter, because they reported that he pulled out of the Browns job like it was a Browns problem, even though he was accepting the Baltimore job like an hour later. It just led to these reports where it felt like people were just piling on to the Browns, when the reality is it feels like this was a pretty cohesive. We've identified our guy. We did our due diligence. We did not rush. I don't know why people wanted them to rush this. They didn't rush it. And hopefully they got it right. We're not going to find out about that until we start seeing the games happening, but hopefully they got it right.
Well, it is easy to pile on the Browns, first of all, because,
yes,
that is what the go-to with everything. Well, the Browns is the Browns. The only thing, and I don't know behind the curtain, is the Rooney Rule thing. It seems like you could have got that out of the way, but they needed to interview Shieldhouse. It's obvious when they interviewed Anthony Lynn, they needed to fill that, and they hired Monken the next day. So it isn't like, that's where I said I expected them to hire Schwartz the next day. They hired Monken. You could say one day. I mean, Monday they went to California. Tuesday they thought about it. Wednesday the announcement at 9 a.m. So they really didn't waste long. I do think what's important here, they didn't want to offer the job until they knew the person was going to accept either, because it's worse to say, hey, Todd, you want to be, oh, you don't? Oh, okay.
No, right.
Because that leaks out and it makes it worse. So I think it makes sense to see what Udinski says and Shieldhouse. They could be in this position again in a year or two. Right. Who knows what happens?
Right.
But to say that it's not what they were looking for, I think is, you never heard them talk about, Sean McDermott or even Harbaugh anymore. I think they might have kicked the tire with Harbaugh, because I think they felt they could have got Harbaugh and Monken. But once that went down the road, I really don't get the sense that they were a disastrous thing. I thought maybe there was disconnect with Andrew Berry. He seems like he would be more of the younger, but the way it come out, sure, they're going to be unified on one front, but I heard two different takes from two different people, and they weren't in the same room, and they were on the same page in their information on how they, put this together. The only thing that I would say there was a little disparity was Andrew Berry talked about thinking they're going to have the youngest roster in the NFL, and we followed up with that, and he says, well, we have 10 draft picks, and you do the math, you add that, because those guys are on the team, you add that all in the equation, they'll be younger maybe on paper than they were this year.
Yeah.
Well, then Haslam said, I'm not going to put a number, but I expect us to win and to be better than this year. So, there's a little bit of disparity, but
well, shoot, if they get the young guys, they wouldn't
have made this
move. It'll make them better.
Well, if you wouldn't make the moves that you were going to make if you were expecting a total rebuild. You wouldn't
Correct.
keep the defense has to stay the same. We got bringing everybody back and trying to keep it as intact. And looking at Junk Monken, just because he's older doesn't mean he can't work with young guys. He was just at Georgia a couple years ago, won back-to-back national championships with a guy named Stetson Bennett, as the quarterback. So I just think that, I do think they have a plan. And Andrew Berry did say it the day they fired Kevin Stefanski, that our search might not look like other teams, because we're looking for specifics. And it's obvious it was offense, I think they brought in Minner. I think they brought in the guy from Seattle, the first early. That was the main thing. You just got to cover your bases. Why would you just say, hey, we're not going to touch all the bases? Cool. Because you don't know how anything's going to go with some. What if somebody come in and Raven said, we want Monken to stay as our head coach? Boom. Well, you don't want to be caught flat-footed, oh, geez.
Right. Well, I do think just to talk a little sense into everybody who I still am seeing people commenting on the Rooney Rule, and I know you just brought it up, but I just want to say something about that real quick. If they had a guy that they feel like they needed to rush to hire, they would have satisfied the Rooney Rule day one. Not an issue. It wouldn't have been a problem. They would have interviewed 2 candidates that satisfied the rule and been done with it.
Yeah.
But Andrew Berry wasn't going to do that. A, I don't think they thought they had to rush. But B, I think Andrew Berry, being an African-American general manager, I don't think his intention was to just satisfy a rule. I think his intention was, well, I'm going to bring in guys that I want to talk to satisfy this rule, and then we'll go from there. But there was no rush for it. And here's the other thing. These people can talk behind the scenes. Like, what is reported, and you know this, Fred, because your job is to report it. What is reported isn't everything that's happening, because we don't know everything that's happening. And you have no idea. This is what was killing me during this process when I was, well, they can't do anything because of the Rooney Rule, and they can't do this because of the Rooney Rule. They could have told Todd Monken a week before they hired him, hey, you're our guy. We're going to go through the rest of our process. You got to satisfy a couple things, but you're our guy. And he could have said, cool, I'm your guy. And that it could have just been done. And they satisfied the rest of the process. So, like, there's no reason to freak out about things that if you think you can question Andrew Berry on some things, you can question how he let an offense devolve into the hellhole pit that it has become the last 2 years. And there's an argument to be made there. But from a just knowing how to do things perspective, from like a running stuff perspective for the team, he's pretty locked in on that. He's pretty locked in.
Yeah, I think that all the way around, so I don't buy it that, that unless you knew exactly what was going on behind the scenes, you can't just say that they didn't get who they wanted in the end, or they didn't have a process that they identified. They weren't just saying, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? They did that sometime probably near the end of the season and identified, I think he said 23 coaches that they wanted to look at, and then whittled it down to 8 that they asked for permission, which is a pretty, I think kind of a wide net, and maybe though a concerted 8. We know who the 8, they requested. And so you can see there, there's quite a difference in ages and backgrounds and different things in there. So I don't have a problem with that. In the end, it doesn't matter if you were the first one to hire a coach or the 10th to hire a coach.
Right.
You want to get it right. And Monken said this about hiring his staff. Somebody asked, when do you expect it to be complete? And he said, I can't put a timetable on it, because in college, when I did that, I mean, we hired the 8th safeties coach that we talked to, and we should have waited, something like that we didn't get it right. And he says, we're going to get it right. And I kind of take that serious, because he knows how important this is. This is his chance right here,
100%.
And what does it matter if it takes a week or whatever to get the right guys and to talk to as many as you possibly can?
That's right. Okay, so back into the press conference, and let's talk about, you brought it up, but let's talk about that highlight moment that everybody referenced, where he was asked basically about Jim Schwartz, and he gave the comment that he didn't take this job because of Jim Schwartz. And when he was going up against that defense, the first thing he said was he plans on making no changes to the design of the defense, no matter what happens. And so when they are finding their defensive coordinator, and Fred, I'll ask if you've got updates on that, but as they're finding a defensive coordinator or maintaining one, yet to be seen, the plan is to find somebody that's going to keep that same style of defense. I loved the way he commented about how hard it was to go up against it. Just a super difficult defense to go up against. So he doesn't want to make big changes. But then the comment of, when he was planning for the defense, he wasn't planning to chip Jim Schwartz. He was planning to chip Myles Garrett. He was planning to have to go up against, Schlesinger and Grant Delpit, and I think he called out Ward, and Campbell got a call
Tyson
out.
Campbell.
Yeah, and I think that answer opened. It made a lot of people's jaws drop because it was very frank, very to the point, like we talked about at the beginning, and just kind of talking about Jim Schwartz while this is just kind of hanging out there. I saw some people immediately react and say, "Well, we know Jim Schwartz isn't coming back." I don't know that I took it that way. I actually think that's how Jim Schwartz would probably talk. So he probably can't be mad about somebody else talking that way. But just kind of your thoughts when you heard that. And Fred, we'll go over some of these other assistant coach things, but any indicators anywhere on where the direction of the defensive coordinator is going?
Yeah, I'm not, in talking to Haslam afterwards and Barry, both of them basically said, Haslam said, this is Todd Monken's day. We're here. We'll talk about the Jim Schwartz on another day. My initial reaction is they're moving on. This train is moving. You're either with us or you're not.
Yeah.
If Jim Schwartz comes back, it would be, I think, he's all on board. You cannot have, because if this team gets off to a 3-9 start and it's the offense problem again, you can't have him going, told you so,
Right.
And I don't think he'd do that. But when he said he said, I have a lot of respect for Jim Schwartz and putting up, and that's all in context. He said he has talked to Schwartz. They didn't want to go there or talk about that today. I don't know how you resolve that. I don't know. Now you look back, I can understand why he was upset, Schwartz, that is. But if he's like saying, okay, that could have really turned Monken off the way he handled it. I mean, you could just be upset and walk out, but you don't have to throw a tantrum and tell every assistant or whatever that I'm done, I'm out of here, that type of stuff. So we don't know. I'm sure that in the interview they said, would you be willing to keep Jim Schwartz on the staff? That was probably, but it's not a requirement for the job.
Right.
And that's why I said, I didn't come here because I came because of the players. And so what I see in talking to Haslam saying he expects we weren't talking about the players. We know the players are coming back that are under contract, but the coaches, I think, are under contract as well. I took it as they expect to keep the defensive staff with or without Schwartz. If Schwartz isn't the coordinator, fine, that they will bring that staff back. And I would say either Ephraim Banda, Jason Tarver, or Brandon Lynch would become the defensive coordinator. That way you have the continuity as close as you can have. The players are all familiar with those guys. I only say Banda because I know he interviewed for the Cowboys defensive coordinator job and the Jets defensive coordinator job. So somewhere around the league, he's got some juice that teams are looking at him. So if whoever they feel, I think all the guys know all the defensive coaches because they're on that to me is what I see happening, probably more likely than Schwartz coming back. He is under contract for 2026.
Well, that answers this question from Fumble 13 that says, does Schwartz have 1 or 2 years left on his contract? And I believe it's just the one,
second year I believe is a club option.
Yeah.
I mean, so they could keep him 2 years. I don't think they would hold him to the contract.
No.
The precedent was set when Kyle Shanahan got out, when he asked to get out, and him and Mike McDaniel, and under Mike Pettin and the Johnny Manziel fiasco. And they let Bill Callahan leave when he was under contract, obviously different circumstances. His son got a head coaching job.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be the Mike Tomlin. We don't want hostages. We want volunteers, that if Schwartz wants out, they'll let him out. They may even at this point say, thanks, Jim, we're moving on, and work out a settlement or something and just say, You threw a tantrum. We can't have that. I don't know.
Well, and
I
they
don't
might.
know.
Well, they
They
might want
might
him back too.
say,
But Todd Monken's listen. Todd Monken isn't just like this low man on the totem pole. He's the head football coach, and I also feel like he is the type of guy that will speak up for himself. And I feel like if this Jim Schwartz thing is hanging over everybody's head because they're going to be patient, I feel like if it gets to a point where Todd Monken feels like, hey, this is kind of interfering with what I'm trying to do as the coach, he's going to walk in and talk to Andrew Berry and Jimmy Haslam and say, all right, we got to make a call on this. And I feel like they will. Like, I love
it might already have happened.
Right.
It'll leak out and so forth. If Schwartz wants to coach, this is the best, I think, obviously, head coach, but he's not going to get a head coaching job in the NFL this year. And
he's not going to coach a better defense.
He's not going to get a defensive coordinator job unless Vic Fangio has a last minute change of mind and decides to retire. The other ones that reportedly were interested in him have all been filled. The only other possibility I see is Mike Vrabel, who brought him in to Tennessee to be a consultant when he was coming off his illness, could bring him up to the Patriots. I think their defensive coordinator, unfortunately, had cancer and missed most of the year. I think he is back for the Super Bowl. I don't know what the long-term situation is there, but something like that. But they're not going to wait around, I don't think, very long, for any of this kind of stuff. So that's what I see. I do think that, as you said, Todd Monken is not going to let it interfere. He's going to say, look, we're going to keep the staff. And as what you just said, Jim Schwartz, this defense, you can say it any way you want, was built for him or the way he wanted it. Last year, we knew that they needed offense up and down the field, and they had their two highest picks. You know that he pounded the table to get me Mason Graham and Carson Schlesinger, two great players. Those were because of Jim Schwartz, and they fit what he was doing. They made an impact. He's got that up and down. He could go anywhere else, and he's not going to have that kind of defense, at least to start, that was built for him. Now, his pride might say, so be it. I'm going to watch somebody else take those players and get the awards and get the fruits of the benefit. I don't know. I don't know his mindset, but I do think that you got some aspiring guys on that staff that are well thought of, and I think that would be the best of both worlds. I think you'd be wrong to bring in somebody completely outside at this point and be the defensive coordinator and try to get them guys to stay under him.
Yeah. Flip to the other side of the ball because, again, we'll see when we see on that. But the other side of the ball is where things have really kind of taken shape because Todd Monken did not waste a lot of time, Fred, in filling out his offensive coaching staff. And we knew about Warhop last week, but since then, and he's coaching the offensive line, but since then, offensive coordinator Travis Switzer, coming from Baltimore, the passing game coordinator Danny Breyer, the associate head coach Daniel Stern, the tight ends coach Jeff Blasco, and the quarterback coach Mike. Is it Bajakian? I think it's Bajakian is how you say it. So,
I think so.
Do we have any interesting tidbits about these guys, or did you hear anything from anybody at Berea about the hiring of these guys? Again, some of these guys getting poached from Baltimore, which part of me just loves that, and some guys have ties that go back a little bit with Todd Monken, like Jeff Blasco, who he worked, I think, here when Todd Monken was the offensive coordinator in 2019. So yeah, just any little tidbits on these offensive hires. Not
too much, but yeah, that says a lot because they had a pretty good run in with the Ravens. Like I already went through their stats. They were like the number 3 scoring team in the NFL the last 3 years overall, and the number 1 rushing team, 166 yards a game. But as far as it says something that he could draw them over, because John Harbaugh was looking at some of the same guys to go to the Giants. So I think they're maybe in a higher position, moving up a notch, with Monken, but it still says that he has some draw. The quarterback coach, as I understand, I think he just was going to Michigan State,
Yeah, he
and
was at UMass.
then I don't know how that works. If he said he was going to Michigan State, but dropped that and came here, he was, I think he was the quarterback coach, back there with Jameis Winston, was setting the world on fire with the Tampa Bay.
Yep.
And Monken was the offensive coordinator for those 3 years. And so he's been around, and he could really help develop Sanders, Gabriel, whatever they bring in. Stern is supposed to be one of them boy wonders, that game management types. And like you said, Blasco, I think he was most recently with the Jets, but he was with Monken before. So it's eerily silent on the defense. You cannot be thinking he's not talking to guys because he doesn't want to be left in the lurch, but nothing's really come out. So that's why I think the defense, other than Schwartz, I think the most of it will be in-house.
Yeah.
There was another offensive Browns coach that was leaked out today that he's going somewhere else. So other ones are leaving and going different places. But there was another offensive assistant that I had heard, Ian Colesti or something like that. It was like a assistant quarterback type coach. So there's 7 or so that I have heard in looking through. But when we were in Berea, they were pretty tight on all that. I thought maybe they'd announce some yesterday, but I did hear that they're still in the Rooney Rule for the coordinators and some of those things. So again, that was when the question came up, and he says, look, when we get our staff, and it's going to take whatever time it takes. We'll know when we have the right people, and we'll announce it. So I like that attitude, not feeling like, oh, I got to get before everybody's gone. He feels pretty confident that he's got a pretty good Rolodex after 37 years coaching.
I think there's 2 themes when I look at the names that have been brought up as the offensive coaching staff. I think the theme number 1 you hit on there with Mike Bajakian, which is it's been a while since he's been in the NFL. And when he was in the NFL, it was with a young quarterback. And then he went to the college ranks, and he's coached quarterbacks, young quarterbacks, developmental guys. He's working at UMass. They don't even know how to play football at UMass, but he's working with developmental guys there. And I think that says something to you, that the Cleveland Browns are at least willing with these young guys, namely Shedeur Sanders, but put Gabriel in there too. They're willing to give them at least this year to figure out, okay, can we get something out of you? And so I think that hire says something about that. But then I think the rest of these guys, and it goes back to Warhol. But we are talking about a whole bunch of guys that when you go read about them, it sounds like Baltimore. It sounds like the Ravens. It sounds like, without obviously Lamar Jackson, but guys that have come in, not just Blasco, but other guys that come in having coached tight ends, and then a whole bunch of guys that are heavily involved with offensive line play and the run game, right? That is, Travis Switzer was the run game coordinator in Baltimore. And I think a lot of kind of what you're seeing indicates that, Todd Monken wants to build up the front. He wants to be smart. If you're going to trot Shedeur Sanders out there, he wants to be smart for him. He wants to build a monstrous running game, have some tight ends play really well as safety valves, and give these kids a chance to actually develop into something as opposed to having to have them carry the team. And so to me, these guys that he've hired shows, I would anticipate at least the Browns being a very physical, at least up front, while they're still trying to see if they have any quarterbacks on the roster, a very physical, a very ground and pound kind of offense. And that should be something a lot of Browns fans get. That should get Browns fans all riled up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't tip his hand on the quarterback, and rightly so. I mean, what good would it do to say, Shadur's my quarterback, or Deshaun's my quarterback,
Yeah,
or
right.
Dylan. So, but if he did address, the assets on offense. That offensive group knows what it takes to have the number one. Like I said, they averaged 166 yards a game on the ground the last 3 years. They look at their offensive line and say, we got to have this type of guys, just like Callahan had certain type of guys for his. You got Judkins. He's not Derrick Henry, but you never know. You've got some guys that you can run the ball with. You need some people up front. And I think that with Monken input, he made it sound like he's going to help design kind of from the ground floor the offensive dynamic going forward with what they have. And I think that should be music to Browns fans' ears. Somebody who's been there, done it. He might look and say, we don't have them right now, but this is what we're going to strive to achieve. And then it's on Barry to bring in those type guys. We don't know if there's a available free agent quarterback. We saw today Green Bay said Malik Willis probably won't be because he's going to get a chance to be a starter. Is that a type of guy, a dual run that he said we got to get this guy, or we can work with Sanders and what we have here and spend the assets on the offensive line and wide receivers. And then if it doesn't really work in a year, okay, then go get the quarterback. I don't know. He's kind of painting with a blank canvas until they start making moves in March. Then we'll know what direction they're going as they go look at free agency before the draft. So I think you can't argue. I don't know these names, but they were pretty successful with the Ravens. And so they come over here. He's comfortable in building the offense, with guys like that can know how to have a running game. And as they look at personnel to fit that, we know a lot of it is with that offensive line and what they want to do. These are the type of guys we could get. We could bring Linderbaum over. We talked about that last week. But as the center, now you got an anchor, and then build out from there.
Yep.
And get your, you got a running back with Judkins, pretty good running back, and a change of pace in Sampson.
Yeah.
And a power guy in Sanders. That could be your Henry, Keaton Mitchell type. Get some guys up front that can move, and that would help your quarterback more than anybody is having a great running game. So I can't fault any of those moves, even though they're not household names.
Yep. Fred, I do want to get, we've got a video one that we'll get to in just a little bit, but we've got some more questions that I starred in the chat. And let's do this one first from chat_username. Real early on asked, if you've heard anything, have we heard any kind of conversations from any kind of off the record sentiment from players about Todd Monken? Have you heard about any of the way the players are reacting to Todd Monken as the head coach, outside of we know Shedeur Sanders is pretty happy?
Well, obviously none of them are around. There was the almost all the defensive assistants that I mentioned were in the press conference room. I don't remember seeing any of the current players. They're off to Bahamas or wherever they go in the off season. So no, I haven't firsthand or even seen a lot mentioned. I think a lot of them, I know I saw some reactions from former players from the Ravens, like Marlon Humphrey, was very positive about Monken. Yeah. I know Jameis Winston couldn't say enough. He can't say enough about anybody, but as far as Monken, really credited him. When he was the number one pick, I mean, he had Monken, and he threw for 4,000 yards his first 2 years, was first time in NFL history a rookie did that in their first 2 years. So, no, but as far as Browns, it's just they're just not around, other than guys that Denzel Ward and guys in the Pro Bowl and stuff like that just haven't been available.
Okay. That leads me to just really quickly. Blink and you missed it. The Pro Bowl happened yesterday. which is fine. It's not a big deal. But I do want your take on this because between last week's show and this week's show, Shedeur Sanders gets named as an alternate and as a Pro Bowler. And it raised a lot of things, a lot of talking points that people had online. I'll give you my thoughts, Fred, and then I'll hear yours. Is Shedeur Sanders in the Pro Bowl because he was like one of the top players in the NFL this year? No. He was a fifth round
2.5 million followers on.
Yes. But it's not, I'm not trying to like say a negative word about Shedeur Sanders. He didn't nominate. He didn't like say, I demand to be in the Pro Bowl. They put him in the Pro Bowl and he went. And I'm happy for him, to be honest with you. The Pro Bowl isn't what it used to be. It's not about that anymore. A lot of guys decide they don't want to do it. It's not a big deal that he went. Other than this, Fred, I think it's a positive. You just sent this kid that went through a lot this season, and it's not a woe is me situation. It's not a woe is him situation because he was also in the NFL and living out his dream, but he went through a lot this year, and he was in some good circumstances and some bad circumstances, but he fought through it. He did things the right way. He earned a lot of people's respect out there this year, even when he wasn't playing great football. But I think the positive is this. I don't mind that kid going out there and being amongst some of the league's best that decide to show up. I don't mind him getting into it back and forth with some of the better defenders in the league, some of the better offensive linemen in the league, and watching how those guys operate, because the best players operate the same way, even in a stupid situation like the Pro Bowl. And I don't mind Shedeur Sanders being out there and getting that confidence boost. It doesn't. Some people were kind of mad that he was out there, and I think, first of all, who cares? Second of all, it's only a good thing for him, I think.
It's devolved into entertainment. If you watch it, it's almost unwatchable, as far as not football, it's just, you got Micah Parsons trolling around on his golf, and stuff like that. But no, I agree with you, is that I think he'd never been in the situation he was with the Browns. And I think it'll be better for him in the long run that he started so far at the bottom of the depth chart instead of just handed a job like, say, a Cam Ward was, because he was the number one pick in the draft. And now he goes, wow, I don't ever want to be in that situation again. And whether that is or not, who knows? But I do think being around those other guys, he's pretty realistic. I mean, he's very confident, but saying, wow, I need to work on my game, and this is what I need to do. He's constantly picking the brain of some of the best. And, and so I do think that, forget the game, but just being out there, I think it was because it is an entertainment type of a game, and who would bring more eyeballs than Shedeur Sanders. But with that being said, you wonder how the Browns could be 5-12 this year with 3 Pro Bowl quarterbacks on their roster.
Oh, jeez.
Deshaun Watson, Shedeur Sanders, and Joe Flacco made it. But
we almost got one whole episode in without saying that name, Fred. We almost got a whole episode in without saying it.
Get used to it, man.
We don't have to talk about him.
Well, no, in March, if they don't bring in another quarterback, I don't know how you can avoid saying his name,
Yeah, I know. And he's going to be on the team, but I don't want to talk about it. All right, I want to get to a couple quick questions before we wrap up here on this week's episode of Inside the Browns Beat. E. Gillen in the comments. This one's for you, Fred. Fine, E. Gillen. I didn't want to answer it anyways. Fred, do you think that Dillon Gabriel stays on the team considering Monken's success with the 5'11" tall Stetson Bennett at Georgia? Thoughts on, is Monken a good thing for Dillon Gabriel?
I think what a lot of people overlook is the value of a quarterback on the rookie contract.
Correct.
And Andrew Berry thought high enough of him to take him in the 3rd round, whether it was a mistake or not. But both Gabriel and Sanders they're on like a bargain contract. I mean, Sanders like $700,000-800,000, and Gabriel's not much more than that. The backup quarterbacks are making $5-6 million, that don't even play.
Right.
So unless they just feel like he's a distraction all the way around, he's going to be here. To be honest, I could see them moving on from Sanders before I saw him moving on from Gabriel because of this. I don't see Shedeur Sanders as an NFL backup. He's your starter or he's
Or he's
out.
not. Yeah, I can see that.
Because most teams, a lot of teams didn't draft him because they didn't need a quarterback to begin with. And if they did, they didn't want to have their number 2 quarterback draw so much attention. I mean, the average, you guys watch and don't know how much we heard every day on social media and when we're out in Berea about Shedeur Sanders. I mean,
yeah, right.
You'd think he was the 20-time Pro Bowl legitimate player, and Kevin Stefanski is ruining his life, for all kinds of reasons. And so I just say that I don't know if Todd Monken would want the distraction or any coach would if he's not somebody they deem as a viable starting quarterback. I'm not saying he's not, and they might really believe he is, but I don't if they went out and got another starting quarterback, then unless they really felt he just needed more development time, I don't see them necessarily. But with that said, I really think both Sanders and Gabriel will be on the contract because they're such a bargain.
I think this is a good point. Phil's not about making all kinds of great points in the comments tonight, but he kind of said he's Tebow 2.0. It doesn't mean he's that type of player, but just if you have Tim Tebow on your roster, you're constantly going to have people saying that Tim Tebow needs to play. If you have Shedeur Sanders on your roster, it's not his fault. It's not Tim Tebow's fault. But if you have Shedeur Sanders on the roster, everybody's no matter.
It's exactly the illustration I've used is Tim Tebow.
Yes.
Is that great guy? Shedeur Sanders, a great kid, everything. But I think a lot of teams didn't draft him wasn't because he wasn't, but for they didn't see him as a starter immediately.
I think it's a great point, and it's not. And I know you're not saying it to kind of bash. I know people are going to take it like, I know somebody's already saying it in the comments, like you're trying to bash him. You're not. It's just that's the package with Shedeur Sanders. If he's not going to be your starter, it's awfully hard to have him on your bench because it's
think about this, Mike. If of the 32 teams in the NFL, how many backup quarterbacks can you name? Almost everyone is a guy that if they go in, their season's over.
You can do some of them.
Well, because the guys that got hurt, so they ended up playing. Right. But if they never got in, I don't know who their backup is.
Yeah, and here in Cleveland, we have to worry about who the fourth stringer is because they're probably going to play that year. All right, 2 more quick things. This is going to be a quick one because it's not a fun answer to this. There's really not an answer to this, but it was asked. So Drew in Brick City says, any word on Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah? I don't think there's been any recent updates, has there?
No, our last chance really with Barry was when they fired Kevin Stefanski, but there were so many other things, they never could really get to that. The combine in end of February, March usually is where Barry talks and Monken would talk. We might get a little bit, but no, I've not got any indication. I mean, the little glint, there was something I think JOK put out during the season that everybody thought might be coming back, something like praise God or just some little.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He did put like an Instagram post.
Yeah. Something that millions of stories are written out of something like that. So, no, it's, we really don't know. So
just in the same vein, Fred, because I know a lot of people are wondering about this. Chef Brian K. This was the last minute addition to the family of user comments here. Any word on Joel Bitonio? Have we heard any kind of which way Joel Bitonio's leaning?
No, I haven't. He said he's going to take some time, but in fairness to the team, he would let them know well before free agency, which is like March 11th or something like that. So I expect that would be coming out one way or the other. I don't know. I think a lot of it does how he feels.
Yeah.
at this point. He's made a lot of money, but again, he's a free agent. So I don't know if they'd want to pay him, 10 million plus again, or if they'd sign a 1-year thing like that, or what. Depends on what he thinks about Monken. I'm sure he's going to meet with him and what his plans are. Conklin, Posick, Teller were all his buddies. It was kind of like a band, hey,
Yeah.
come on back. And last year, Conklin said, oh, he'll be back, and I'm sure they all, but most of those guys are going to be gone probably. And so I don't know. It would really be if he just feels like, I think I want to give it another go.
Yeah, maybe.
He's still probably the best
he might
one
be
they
excited.
got.
He might be excited about the head coach too. All right, one last one, Fred, before we call it a show. But anytime we get a user submitted video, I want to play it. I watched the video. We kind of answered this last week, but I want to take it a slightly different direction with our answer. But I do want to show this. This is from Bill that gave us a user submitted video question.
Okay.
Hey guys, love the show. I had a question for y'all. If you were Andrew Berry, what areas of need would you focus on for the upcoming NFL draft? Thanks.
All right. So again, that's a question that we pretty much had last week. We got a great one in the last week, similar vein. But I do want to say this. I'm gonna answer this one, and Fred, you give me your thoughts on if you think I'm wrong or not. I just would remind people. Fred, you and I have talked about it over and over and over again. You have made the comment about drafting a wide receiver and then another wide receiver, drafting an offensive lineman and then another offensive lineman. And I think one thing that needs to come into play here, I think very confidently, if you take pick 6, pick 24, and I think the next one is pick 38 or something like that, right? Those are the first 3 Browns picks.
Right.
I think one of those picks is going to be in a position that nobody is talking about. Because probably. I think what's going to happen, we're sitting here talking about guys like Tyler Linderbaum. We're talking about, I think the Cleveland Browns are pretty aggressively going to attack the offensive line in free agency because it makes a lot of sense for them to do that. And remember, they are going to have some freed up space to be able to do that, especially with where the NFL set the cap. Andrew Berry knew what he was doing by pushing all this money off. So their way that they're going to approach things is going to kind of change by the time we actually get to the draft, because they're going to have filled out some spots, and then we're going to have an answer on Joel Bitonio or some of these other guys. And so I would just caution people, as you get ready and you're getting excited about these guys in the draft, I would caution you, don't be surprised if pick 24 rolls around and there's a phenomenal cornerback sitting there. I don't think they would take a corner with Emerson coming back, but a phenomenal edge rusher that can go opposite Myles Garrett, but like first round talent. Don't be surprised if somebody like that goes off the board to the Cleveland Browns, because should they address these other things and do a good job of it in free agency, it's going to open things up for them. Now, I still think pick 6 for me, in my opinion, almost has to be a wide receiver at this point, because the fall off from the top end wide receivers to the next group is pretty big. There's 3 top end wide receivers in this draft. I think you got to come away with one of those guys. Otherwise, though, I think it's kind of a free for all. If they hit this free agency the right way, I think it's going to be about just accumulating more talent, and who knows where that's going to be. So that's just my 2 cents on it. I think it's real easy right now to say 2 wide receivers, 2 offensive linemen, and then see what happens later in the draft. But I would be willing to bet that they go a different direction than that.
Yeah, it always is a marriage of free agency with the draft, and people that are put on mock drafts now have no idea. If you sign whatever position, 2 number 1 wide receivers, you're not going to draft one, and same thing with 2 big tackles or whatever it is.
Right.
So that does work hand in hand. But I don't want to disagree with you. I agree that they should go get a couple people, but I took away in talking to Andrew Berry yesterday, when we did our side session, he was somebody asked him, how can you be the youngest team? And he went through it saying, well, we have 10 draft picks and added to what we did last year. And we don't expect to be that active in free agency, something to those lines. And last year, the big one was Malik Collins. That was a good signing, but I got the idea that they felt like it's almost better to target one guy or two guys than to do a bunch of them. He could be wrong. He could be sandbagging, not to get expectations too high. But I think more and more we see with free agency, people get out of whack. They get way more than they should. And that's the thing with Linderbaum. Maybe they target him, but maybe it gets to 30 million. They go, we're not going there.
No.
That type of craziness. So I don't think he didn't sound like they feel like we're one couple moves from winning the Super Bowl.
Right.
He didn't say that, So I took it as, the draft. They might get that big offensive line signing or wide receiver. I don't know. And then the draft. But I do agree. When I've seen is the three receivers at the top, you got to come out with a playmaking guy like that.
Yeah. And you're not going to find that in free agency. You're not going to find that level of receiver.
Or you're going to pay $50 million a year or something, like guys
not even there.
Well, the top free agents and wide receivers the last couple of years have got off the books. I remember Christian Kirksey, was getting, record money and different things. So anyway, that's where you get guys, you get them under contract. You got Jamar Chase like in there and the T. Higgins, guys like that. You get them on those rookie contracts and you deal with it. But yes, offensive line, I don't know, the premier positions to me are tackle, and you seem like you need a couple of them. So if you could get at least somebody in free agency and Batonio comes back, then you can cobble it together. They signed, I believe, that Tevin Jenkins, who was playing in place of Teller, to a 2-year contract, I think. So as a free agent. So they might be thinking he could be it. You would think it's time for Zenter to step up. You would think that now Whippler got hurt, but there are some options. Just depends on what Monken and how these offensive line coaches evaluate. So, I do think it's going to be fluid, but I do think it's going to get a lot of attention. As much as they can do on the offensive line will go a long way to help whoever's quarterback with a line and weapons. So, right now I'd say wide receiver at the top, and then at the second could be the best player, available. But if you can get a starting tackle, there, that would be good. And then we saw what they did with the 30s pick. They got Schlesinger and Judkins. They did some upgrading really well on offense in the draft last year without using the top 2 picks on offense. They started in the, the 30s, and got Judkins and Sampson and the quarterbacks. And so Fannin. So when you look at the offense right now, there's only, what I can see without Batonio, only like 3 guys you can count on to really be good. And so that you paint the whole thing, go heavy offense, free agency, and the draft, and you hit like you did last year, you can be in great shape.
That's right. Speaking of great shape, that's great shape for the last bit of the show here, as we are running a little bit over on time. Just a couple reminders. First, for this show, remember, we're going on a little hiatus the next 2 weeks. Unless something big happens, then we'll figure it out. But next Wednesday, the Wednesday after, do not anticipate 7 o'clock Inside the Browns Beat. Little break here for us on Inside the Browns Beat. Little break for Fred on Inside the Browns Beat. And then we'll be back for sure on February 25th with Inside the Browns Beat. So don't miss us too much. We will be back, but just don't look for us here at 7 o'clock next week, because you'll be missing us. Also, reminder, 51 minutes from now, 9 o'clock is episode 300 of the Garage Beers podcast, and you don't want to miss it. Some of the best guests as we just continue the all-star lineups, so you do not want to miss episode 300 of Garage Beers. You better bring a celebration beer with you to join us for that one, because it's going to be a great time. So we'll see you back here at 9 o'clock for that. That's going to do it for us. Fred, you got one more point of order?
Well, I just want to congratulate you. 300 episodes. That's great. This is our 25th episode, and
Yes.
if we're fortunate to get to 300, that would be accomplishment. So I want to congratulate you and your show and your guests tonight, Travis Hafner, Brian Brennan, and Mike Fratello. That's hitting a home run right there. So great job, and everybody tune in for that. Thank you for 20. We'll be back on the 25th, and we'll be right into it.
I could do 275 more of these episodes with you, Fred. I'm enjoying it. I'm in for that. I'm in for that. Thank you very much, though, Fred, and thanks everybody in the comments for saying that. We hope you'll come join us and hang out with us on episode 300. But that'll do it for us. Go follow our show. I made a special page for it at Browns Beat OBR on Twitter. Make sure you are tuned into everything OBR at the OBR on the socials and at OBR.com because it is the oldest and largest Browns coverage site in Cleveland, and it's the best. And the community at the OBR.com is the best, so you want to make sure you are over there joining in with all of that as well. All right, that's going to do it for us here for this episode of Inside the Browns Beat. We appreciate you guys all for joining us live here. We thank you for supporting us every single week. We'll see you back on this show in a couple of weeks. But for Fred Greetham, go follow him online at Fred Greetham9. I'm Michael Keefe. Follow me at Garage Beers. Mike, we'll see you February 25th. Until then, as always, go Browns.